My daughter-in-law humiliated me in English. She is so clumsy, she does not understand a thing. I stayed quiet, listening to her talk badly about me for half an hour. For dessert, I raised my glass and made a toast, in fluent English. The color drained from her face instantly. I raised my cut crystal glass, the one that had belonged to my mother, and the silence in the dining room became so thick I could hear the beating of my own heart. Victoria had her mouth slightly open, frozen in the middle of a laugh that never quite came out. Her friends, those 3 elegant women who 30 minutes ago were making fun of me in English, had left their forks suspended in the air. My son Julian looked at me with his eyes wide open, as if he were seeing a stranger. But I was not a stranger. I was me, the real me, the one they never bothered to get to know. I would like to propose a toast, I said with the perfect pronunciation I learned during 40 years of working at an American corporation. My voice did not tremble. My hands did not tremble. For the past 30 minutes, I have understood every single word you have said about me. The color abandoned Victoria's face like water draining from a tub. First her cheeks, then her neck. I watched her turn pale in slow motion, and something inside of me, something that had been crushed for 18 months of humiliations, finally took a breath. But let me go back, because to understand how I got to that moment, how a 68-year-old woman ended up giving the most important speech of her life in a language they all thought she did not master, you need to know the whole story. If you want to keep listening to real stories of women who found their voice when they least expected it, subscribe to the channel, because this story is just beginning, and what is coming will leave you speechless. My name is Elena. I know it is a common name, but my parents chose it with intention. I was born in a time where women of my generation did not have many options, but I decided to create my own. I did not go to a university. My family did not have the money for that. But at 20 years old, I got a job as a receptionist at a textile manufacturing company that had just opened in downtown Chicago. The owners were local businessmen. That is where I learned English, not in a fancy classroom, but by listening, repeating, and staying after my shift to practice with the managers who were patient with me. In 5 years, I went from receptionist to administrative assistant. In 10, I was the right hand of the director of operations. My English became perfectly fluent because I used it 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. But when I left that office, I went back to being just Elena, Richard's wife, Julian and Rachel's mom. And that was fine. I did not need to show off my English at family gatherings or neighborhood block parties. What for? My worth was not tied to proving to others what I could do. I worked at that company for 40 years. Every 2 weeks I saved whatever I could. Every bonus, every holiday pay, every extra dollar went straight into an account that Richard did not even touch because he knew it was my dream. And that dream had an address. A home of my own. Not rented, not borrowed. Mine. When I finally bought this house 20 years ago, $250,000 that I paid for with my sweat, I cried for an hour, sitting on the hardwood floor of the empty living room. Richard hugged me and told me, "You did it, my love. This is yours." And it was. Every brick, every window, every corner of this historic home in Oak Park had my effort engraved on it. Richard died 12 years ago. A silent heart attack while he slept. He left me alone, but never poor, because I was always good at managing money. My 2 children were already adults. Julian was 30 years old and worked at a tech company. Rachel, my youngest daughter, had moved to New York to study architecture and stayed there, building her own life. I stayed in this house, alone, yes, but at peace. I tended to my garden in the backyard, drank my morning coffee in the kitchen that cost me so much to remodel, and welcomed my children on Sundays for dinner. Life was simple and I liked that. Until 3 years ago, Julian arrived with news that at first filled me with joy. He had met someone. Her name was Victoria, 39 years old, an event coordinator, perfect smile and impeccable manners. He met her at a tech conference in Austin. He showed me pictures. A slender woman, with brown hair, always styled without a strand out of place, wearing expensive but discreet clothes. "She is incredible, Mom," Julian would tell me with that light in his eyes that only new love brings. "She is smart, hardworking, she gets me." The first time she came to dinner, she brought a bottle of French wine and imported flowers. She praised every detail of my house with words that sounded beautiful, but that now, looking back, I recognize as appraisals. "What a generous space for just one person," she said while her eyes scanned the walls, the crown molding, the dimensions of the dining room. "It must be a lot of work to maintain all this." It was not a compliment. It was a calculation. But I did not see it then. I only saw an educated woman who made my son happy. And when Julian announced that they were getting married, I hugged Victoria and told her, "Welcome to the family." I did not know that I had just opened the door to the worst mistake of my life, because what would come next, what Victoria had planned from the first day she stepped into my house, not even my worst nightmare could have imagined. Do you want to know what happened next? Stay? Because what is about to come will make you question everything you thought you knew about the people you let into your life. Let me tell you who I was before Victoria entered my life like a silent tornado. Because to understand the magnitude of what they did to me, you need to know everything I had to sacrifice to get here. When Richard died, a lot of people assumed I would fall apart, a widow at 56 years old, with a large house and 2 independent children. Poor Elena, I would hear the neighbors whisper, so alone in that huge house. What is she going to do now without her husband? What they did not know is that I never depended completely on Richard. I loved him. Yes, we built a life together, of course. But I always had my own money, my own job, my own identity, beyond being someone's wife. My job at the textile company was not just employment. It was my refuge, my pride, my daily proof that I could achieve things on my own. I started from the bottom, so far down that on my first day I was assigned to clean the restrooms of the administrative office. I was 20 years old and barely knew how to navigate a corporate environment. But I had something that money cannot buy, a hunger to learn. Mr. Patterson, the director of operations, was a tall man from Boston who had infinite patience. He lent me industry manuals, those thick books with yellowed pages that I still keep on my bookshelf. "Elena," he told me one day, "you have potential. Do not waste it." I did not waste it. I stayed 2 hours after my shift, unpaid, listening to the sales calls and reading over the accounts. I wrote down words in a notebook I still have. Schedule, deadline, shipment, quality control. I practiced in front of the mirror at home, correcting my professional tone until my jaw ached. Richard would laugh, fondly, always fondly, when he heard me from the living room. "The delivery has been delayed. The delivery has been delayed." In 5 years, I went from cleaning bathrooms to coordinating international shipments. In 10, I managed all the communication with suppliers across the country. My business acumen was so good that when executives from the headquarters in New York came, I was the one who accompanied them, who translated not just numbers, but intentions, nuances, that invisible language that you only learn by living in the corporate world. I earned a good salary, not a fortune, but enough to save. And I saved as if my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. Every 2 weeks I set aside 30% of my paycheck. No excuses, no, just this once I will spend it because I deserve it. No, pure discipline. Richard handled the household expenses with his salary as an accountant. I saved mine. We had an unspoken agreement. He provided for the day-to-day. I built the future. And that future took the shape of a house of our own. Renting my whole life gave me anxiety. The uncertainty of the landlord raising the rent, of being asked to vacate, of never having a place that was truly ours. I wanted roots. I wanted walls that were mine, a roof that no one could take from me. It took me 25 years to gather the money. 25 years of saying no to trips, to expensive clothes, to unnecessary outings. My coworkers spent their bonuses on designer bags or vacations to Florida. I deposited every extra dollar into my savings account. When I finally had the $250,000, an amount that might sound like a little today, but back then was a fortune, I looked for this house in Oak Park. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a backyard with an old oak tree that was older than I was, original hardwood floors that only needed love and maintenance. It was not a mansion, but it was perfect. The day I signed the deed, I was shaking so much, I had to hold the pen with both hands. The real estate agent looked at me with concern. "Are you all right, ma'am?" I smiled at him with tears running down my cheeks. I am more than all right. I am home. Richard hugged me outside the office. My property-owning wife, he whispered in my ear, and I felt invincible. My children grew up in that house, Julian and Rachel, two completely different personalities since they were young. Rachel was fire and determination. By 15, she already knew she wanted to be an architect. She studied late, got straight A's, fought for every opportunity. She left for New York at 18 on a full scholarship to an Ivy League school and never looked back. Today she has her own firm, designs corporate buildings, and earns more than I ever made. And every month she calls me. She visits when she can. She shows off her projects with that pride I recognize because it is the same one I felt with my work. Julian was different, calmer, more complacent. A good student, but without Rachel's hunger. He got a job at a tech company after college, a comfortable position with a decent salary. He stayed living with me until he was 30 years old. Not because he could not afford to be independent, but because, well, why move out if mom cooks, washes, and never charges rent? I allowed it. That was my first mistake. I allowed it because he was my son, because after Richard died it made me feel less alone, because convincing myself that I was helping him save was easier than admitting I was spoiling him. When he finally moved into his own apartment, I missed him terribly, but I also breathed. For the first time in decades, the house was completely mine. Quiet, organized, filled with my plants, my books, my perfect routine. Until Julian met Victoria, and all that balance that took me a lifetime to build began to wobble without me even noticing, because Victoria did not just want my son. Victoria wanted my house, my hard work, my legacy, and she was willing to do whatever it took to get it. What she did not know is that I had survived 40 years in a cutthroat corporate environment. I had negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts. I had faced executives who underestimated me. Did she really think I was not going to recognize a manipulator when I had one dining at my own table? The first time Victoria stepped into my house, she arrived with a bouquet of white orchids and a bottle of red wine that cost more than my weekly groceries. Julian led her by the arm with that foolish smile men get when they are completely bewitched. "Mom, this is Victoria. Victoria, my mom Elena." She extended her hand to me. She did not hug me, I noted, with a perfect smile that did not reach her eyes. "Ma'am, what a pleasure to finally meet you. Julian speaks wonders of you." Her handshake was firm, calculated, the kind given by people who read in some self-help book that a strong greeting projects confidence. "The pleasure is mine," I replied, and invited her in. What happened over the next 2 hours should have set off all my alarms. But a mother's love is blind, and I wanted so badly to see my son happy that I ignored every red flag Victoria planted that night. She entered my house like an appraiser. Her eyes scanned every corner with a precision that made me uncomfortable. It was not the curious look of someone seeing a new place. It was the look of someone calculating value, potential, opportunities. "What a spacious house," she said as she walked into the living room. Her heels clicked on my original hardwood floors. That hollow sound I always liked, but that night felt invasive. 3 bedrooms, right? And this high ceiling. In this neighborhood, properties like this are worth a fortune. She did not say, "What a cozy house," or "What a beautiful home you have built," she said. "They are worth a fortune." As if my house were an investment instead of my entire life materialized in bricks. "I bought it 20 years ago," I told her, as I served fresh coffee in the ceramic mugs I bought from a local artisan. "It cost me every dollar I saved over 25 years of work." Victoria held the mug delicately. "How admirable, though it must be a lot of work to maintain all this alone." That pause before alone was intentional. I knew it in that moment but decided to ignore it. "I managed just fine," I replied. Julian, my poor, naive son, picked up on nothing. He was too busy looking at her as if she were a miracle fallen from the sky. "Mom is very independent," he bragged. "She worked 40 years at a major corporation. She retired 5 years ago with a decent pension. She is the hardest working woman I know." Victoria smiled. "Fascinating. And do you keep up with modern technology then?" I looked her right in the eyes. I could have told the truth. I could have answered that yes. I coordinated international video calls, negotiated software contracts, that my technical skills were probably better than hers. But something in her tone, something condescending, something that hinted that a woman of my age and appearance could not possibly master the modern world, made me keep quiet. Just the basics, I lied. Nothing special. I saw a gleam of satisfaction in her eyes, as if she had just confirmed something she already suspected, that I was exactly what I appeared to be. A simple older woman from the suburbs who got lucky buying a house in an area that appreciated in value. She underestimated me in that exact moment, and I let her. During dinner, I served a slow-roasted brisket and homemade macaroni and cheese that took me 2 days to prepare. Victoria barely touched a bite. "It is delicious, but I am watching my figure," she said with a little laugh. "The wedding, you know. I want to look perfect in the photos." Julian almost choked on his water. "Wedding? Did you already talk to your mom about that?" Victoria placed a hand over his, that possessive gesture some women use to mark their territory. "It is not official yet, but let us just say I have my hopes," she looked at me. "Would that not be wonderful, Elena? And if my son is happy, I am happy," I told her. What a white lie. What I should have told her was, "You just met me 2 hours ago, and you are already planning a wedding. You were evaluating my house as if it were yours, and I just watched you reject a meal that took me 2 days to prepare because you are watching your figure." But I did not say any of that. Because it was the first dinner, because I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, because my son looked at her as if he had found the meaning of his life. That night, after they left, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea. The house smelled like roasted meat and that expensive perfume Victoria wore. A floral fragrance that now seemed too sweet, almost cloying to me. I looked at the orchids she had left on the dining room table. Beautiful, expensive, but with no roots. Cut flowers destined to wither in a week. That was my first sign. The rootless orchids. I should have seen it coming. But a mother's love makes you ignore even the most obvious signs. It makes you believe you are being paranoid, exaggerating, that you are looking for flaws in someone who only wants to make your son happy. What I did not know is that Victoria had not come to meet me. She had come to study me, to measure how much resistance I would put up, how much she could manipulate, how easy it would be to displace me from my own house. And I, without realizing it, had just shown her all my cards except one, because when I played the part of the simple, out-of-touch older woman, I had just handed her the perfect weapon. The assumption she would use to humiliate me, to mock me, to plan my displacement right in front of my nose. What Victoria did not know is that I had just set the most perfect trap of my life. The following 6 months were like watching my son disappear in slow motion. It was not a sudden change. Those are easy to detect and confront. It was gradual, almost imperceptible, like when a plant withers so slowly that you do not notice exactly when it stopped being alive. Before Victoria, Julian came over every Sunday. It was our tradition since he moved out of the house. He would arrive at 11 o'clock in the morning. We would drink coffee, then we cooked together. He chopped the vegetables while I prepared the meat. He told me about his week, his coworkers, his plans. We ate in the dining room with the windows open, listening to the birds in the backyard. The first Sunday after meeting Victoria, he arrived on time. But he had his phone in his hand, checking the screen every 5 minutes. "Sorry, Mom. Victoria is organizing a major charity gala and she is stressed out." "Do not worry, my son," I told him, even though something inside me was already starting to feel uneasy. The second Sunday he arrived late. Victoria needed help with some things at her apartment. You know how moving is. The third Sunday he canceled. "I am so sorry, Mom." Victoria got tickets for a Broadway show downtown that she has been wanting to see for months. "I promise I will drop by next week without fail." He did not drop by the next week, nor the one after that, nor the other one. By the 4th month of their relationship, my Sundays had become empty. Julian appeared once every 3 weeks, always in a rush, always with an excuse that began with "Victoria needs" or "Victoria and I have to." I tried to talk to him. One afternoon when he came to pick up some tools he had left stored away, I stopped him at the door. "Julian, I feel like we do not see each other as much as before." He looked at me with that expression children get when they think their mothers are being dramatic. "Mom, I am in a serious relationship now. It is normal to spend more time with my partner. I know, my son, and I am glad you are happy. But before, we could make room for both, right?" For Victoria and for me. He sighed. It is just that Victoria feels you and I have a very close relationship. And she needs to feel like the priority in my life right now. Those words dropped like stones in my stomach. Close? I am your mother, Julian. We are supposed to have a close relationship. I know. But she comes from a different family, you know, more independent. And she thinks that at my age I should have more. Autonomy. As if coming to eat with your mother on Sundays was a chain instead of a bond of love. I did not argue. I learned a long time ago that arguing with a man in love is like yelling at the wind. It only wears out your throat. But the signs kept piling up like dark clouds before a storm. Victoria began making comments that sounded like concern but carried hidden venom. Elena, are you not scared of living alone in such a big house? At your age, anything could happen. A fall, a slip, and nobody would find out until hours later. Or worse? I have seen beautiful condos near downtown, modern, with elevators, with a doorman. For a woman your age, it would be much more practical, and with what your house is worth, you could buy something comfortable and still have money left over to travel, to enjoy. The first time she suggested I sell my house, I almost choked on my coffee. The three of us were there, Victoria, Julian, and I, in my living room. I had just served a fresh blueberry pie I baked from scratch. Sell my house? I repeated, making sure I had heard correctly. Victoria smiled with that fake sweetness I was already starting to recognize. It is just a suggestion, Elena. Think about it. This house is massive for one person. The upkeep must be exhausting. The property taxes. The repairs. Would it not be easier to have something small, manageable? I looked at Julian, expecting him to say something. To defend the home where he grew up. To remember the afternoons playing in the yard, the Thanksgivings in the dining room, the summers playing baseball in the driveway. But Julian just shrugged. It is not a bad idea, Mom. I mean, you do not have to decide right now. But Victoria is right that this house is a lot of work. I felt something break inside of me, not with noise, but with that terrible silence of things shattering in deep places where no one sees them. This house, I said with a controlled voice, I paid for with 25 years of savings. Every brick carries my effort. It is not a lot of work. It is my home. Victoria raised her hands in a conciliatory gesture. Of course. No one is pressuring you. We just want what is best for you. But her eyes said something else. Her eyes said, this house should be ours, and I am going to make you leave it. That night, after they left, I sat in the backyard under the old oak tree. The stars shone timidly through the city lights. My tree was over 50 years old. It was here before me, before this house, before all my problems. I thought about calling Rachel, telling her my suspicions. But what would I tell her? Your brother has a girlfriend who wants me to sell my house. I would sound paranoid. I would sound like a jealous and possessive mother-in-law. So I kept quiet. I locked my worries away in that place where women of my generation store everything. Deep, invisible, painful. I did not know that silence, that decision not to cause conflict, not to seem like the problematic mother-in-law, would cost me much more than I ever imagined. Because Victoria was not making suggestions. She was planting seeds. And those seeds would grow to become the most calculated and cruel plan anyone had ever plotted against me. A plan that would start with an $80,000 wedding, where I would discover exactly how little I mattered to the woman who was about to become my daughter-in-law. The invitation arrived by courier 3 months before the wedding, an ivory envelope with gold lettering requesting the honor of my presence at the matrimonial union of Julian and Victoria, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. A boutique country club, 500 guests, and I knew nothing about the preparations. I called Julian immediately. My son, when were we going to talk about the wedding? There was an awkward pause on the other end of the line. Mom, the thing is, Victoria's family is organizing everything. You know how these things go. Her dad insisted on doing it his way. But I am your mother. Am I not going to participate in anything? Of course you are. You will be there, which is what matters. I would be there. Like any other guest, like the neighbor you send an invitation to out of obligation. I swallowed the disappointment and asked, "Do you guys need help with anything?" "I have savings, my son. I can contribute. Do not worry about that. Mr. Montgomery already covered everything. He says it is tradition for the bride's family to handle it." Mr. Montgomery, that was how he talked about his father-in-law now. With that reverential respect he never used to talk about his own father. The wedding would be at an exclusive country club on the outskirts of Lake Geneva. Victoria's family, the Montgomerys, owned a chain of successful car dealerships across the Midwest. Real money. The kind of money that shows in how people hold their wine glass, in how they talk about the lake house, as if everyone had one. Rachel flew in from New York 2 days before. She arrived at my house with her suitcase and that energy she always brings, like an organized tornado. "Mom, why did you not tell me Julian was getting married? I had to find out through social media." "I only found out myself 3 months ago," I admitted while serving her coffee. "And since then they have not included me in absolutely anything." My daughter looked at me with those eyes she inherited from me. Dark, direct, incapable of tolerating injustices. "Are you telling me your only son is getting married, and they have you as a filler guest?" "Rachel, do not make a scene. It is his day. I want Julian to be happy. And what about your happiness? Does it not count?" I did not know what to answer. Because honestly, I was no longer sure that my happiness counted for anyone other than myself. The day of the wedding dawned perfectly. Clear sky, ideal temperature, that kind of weather people pay thousands of dollars to have. Rachel helped me get ready. I put on a navy blue dress, elegant but discreet, and some pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. I looked in the mirror and saw a 68-year-old woman trying to look dignified on the day that should be one of the happiest of her life. We arrived at the country club at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The place was spectacular. Pergolas covered in white flowers, gold Tiffany chairs, centerpieces that looked straight out of a magazine. I calculated mentally. This cost at least $80,000, maybe more. A wedding planner with a clipboard greeted us at the entrance. Name? Elena. I am the groom's mother. He checked his list. Table 17. Rachel frowned. Table 17? Should she not be at the head table? The coordinator looked at us with that forced patience of someone who has dealt with family dramas all day. The head table is only for the bride and groom and the bride's parents. Table 2 is for the groom's direct family. Then that is where we should be, Rachel insisted. I am sorry, those instructions come directly from the Montgomery family. She grabbed my arm. Mom, this is ridiculous. We are going to talk to Julian. No, I stopped her. I am not going to ruin his day. We are going to table 17. We walked through the garden toward the back. Table after table of elegant people, chatting, laughing. Table 17 was almost at the edge of the property. Near the portable restrooms they had decorated with ribbons to hide the fact that they were portable restrooms. We sat with distant cousins of Julian that I did not even recognize. An aunt I had not seen since Richard's funeral. A couple of guys from Julian's college fraternity who looked just as uncomfortable as we did. From there, I watched the ceremony. My son walking down the aisle arm in arm with Victoria's mother, because apparently that was the new tradition. Victoria arriving in a designer gown that easily cost $20,000, with a cathedral veil and a bouquet of imported roses. They looked happy, Julian cried as he put the ring on her finger. And I, from my table 17, also cried, but not out of happiness. The reception was worse. Victoria's parents gave a 20-minute speech about welcoming Julian into the Montgomery family, as if it were an honor being bestowed upon him. They spoke of values, of tradition, of legacy. Nobody mentioned Richard. Nobody spoke of how I raised that man who was now standing in front of 300 people. Nobody thanked the 42 years I dedicated to shaping the groom that everyone was now celebrating. Halfway through dinner, a cut of prime rib that I could not eat because my stomach was tied in knots from anger. Victoria walked near our table with a group of friends. They were heading toward the open bar laughing with that carelessness that only people who have never suffered possess. They saw me. I know they saw me. But Victoria looked away as if I were part of the decoration. And then I heard her. She spoke with her friends in a low voice, but not low enough. She is kind of old-fashioned, you know, one of those small-town mothers-in-law who thinks her son belongs to her forever. Her friends laughed. One of them, a blonde with too much Botox, asked, "And does it not bother you that she lives alone in that huge house?" Victoria made a gesture with her hand, dismissive, cruel. "Give it time. When she has to climb up to the roof to fix a leak or when the water heater breaks, she will understand that it is too much work. You will see she ends up selling it and moving into something more appropriate for her age." They walked away laughing, and I was left frozen in my chair, with my fork suspended in the air, feeling how every word pierced my chest like pins. Rachel had heard everything. Her face was red with fury. "Mom, this is unacceptable. I am going to go over there." "You are not going anywhere," I told her with a firm voice, even though I was trembling inside. "We are not going to make a scene. I am not going to be the dramatic mother-in-law who ruined her son's wedding. But she just. I know what she did. And I am going to keep it to myself. But not here, not today." Later, when the newlyweds opened the dance floor, I searched for Julian with my eyes. I wanted him to see me, to remember that his mother was there, relegated to the back like any random guest. But he only had eyes for Victoria. They spun around the dance floor while the photographers captured every angle, every smile, every moment of what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. Rachel and I left before they cut the cake. I could not stand one more minute in that beautiful country club that felt like a battlefield where I had already lost without even putting up a fight. On the drive back to Chicago, my daughter drove in silence, until she finally exploded. "I cannot believe Julian did this to you." Table 17. "Seriously?" "It was not Julian," I said, looking out the window at the highway lights. "It was her. And he let her. And are you going to allow it?" I stayed quiet, because the truth was, I did not know what to do. Confronting my son meant risking losing him completely. Staying quiet meant accepting that my place in his life was reducing to nothing. What I did not know is that public humiliation was just the appetizer. Because 6 months later, when Victoria and Julian knocked on my door, asking to stay temporarily in my house, the real hell would begin, and I would learn exactly how cruel a woman who decided your home should be hers could be. 6 months after the wedding, I received a call from Julian on a Tuesday night. His voice sounded tense, ashamed. "Mom, can we come see you tomorrow? Victoria and I need to talk to you about something important." My stomach tightened. Nothing good starts with, "We need to talk about something important." They arrived the next day. Julian had dark circles under his eyes, and Victoria had a smile that did not match the supposed urgency. They sat in my living room that I had decorated with custom throw pillows and the wooden bookshelf Richard built with his own hands. "Mom?" Julian began without looking me in the eyes. "We have had some financial problems." Victoria squeezed his hand in a gesture that looked like support, but that I recognized as control. "What Julian means is that we made some investments that did not turn out as we expected, and the luxury apartment we rent is incredibly expensive. $4,000 a month. $4,000. More than what many families make in an entire month. And what are you planning to do?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. I felt it coming the way you feel the rain before it falls. Julian finally looked at me. "We were thinking. Just for a while, Mom, just until we get back on our feet. Could we stay here? 2, 3 months maximum. 2 or 3 months. That phrase should have been my cue to say no. But he was my son, my only boy, and the voice in my head, that motherly voice that forgives everything, allows everything, told me, "It is temporary. Help him." "All right," I said, "but only temporary." Victoria smiled, and this time the smile did reach her eyes. But it was not a smile of gratitude. It was a smile of victory. They moved in that weekend. 2 suitcases, they had told me. They arrived with a moving truck. Boxes and boxes of things that began to invade my house like a silent tide. Clothes that took over my guest closet. Victoria's shoes. 30 pairs, I counted them, lined up in the hallway. Beauty products that filled my bathroom until there was no space left for my own face creams. "It is just while we get everything organized," Victoria would say every time I saw another box appear in my living room. The first week was tolerable. We ate dinner together, we talked. Victoria even helped me wash the dishes a couple of times, although always with that air of doing me a massive favor. The second week the changes began. "Elena, do you mind if I move this armchair? It is blocking the natural light and, according to interior design blogs, the energy needs to flow." She did not wait for my answer. By the time I processed what she had said, my armchair, the one where Richard used to sit and read the Sunday paper, was already shoved into a corner against the wall. "Elena, these curtains are very heavy. They give the house a sad vibe. I bought some new ones, more modern. I hope you do not mind. The curtains my mother gave me when I bought the house ended up folded in a trash bag. Elena, do you still use this vase? It looks very dated." The ceramic vase Richard brought me for our 20th anniversary disappeared. When I asked about it, Victoria said casually, "Oh, it slipped from my hands while I was dusting it. But do not worry. I will buy you a new one." I did not want a new one. I wanted mine, the one with the artisan's signature on the bottom, the one that held 20 years of memories. But I did not say anything. Because Julian was stressed with work, because it was only 2 or 3 months, because I did not want to be the difficult mother-in-law. My silence was my mistake. Victoria interpreted it as permission. By the first month, my house no longer felt like mine. The framed landscapes and the vintage mirror I had hung with such care were replaced by modern black and white prints Victoria bought at an upscale decor store. "It is more minimalist," she explained. "More elegant. My plants in the backyard, my succulents that I cultivated for years, my geraniums that bloomed every spring were reorganized until half of them died from lack of sunlight. We needed space for the new barbecue grill," Victoria said when I found my pots piled up in a corner. The kitchen became her territory. She threw away my spices, the expensive cinnamon sticks, the fresh peppercorns, the premium saffron that cost me $80 an ounce because they were expired. She replaced my cast iron skillets, seasoned for decades, with non-stick Teflon sets that got scratched in the first week. "It is more hygienic," she insisted. But the worst part was not the things. It was the feeling of becoming invisible in my own house. Victoria hosted dinners with her friends, those elegant women with designer bags and perfect nails, without even giving me a heads up. I would come downstairs from my bedroom and find my dining room occupied, my dinnerware being used, my wine being poured. "Oh, Elena, I did not know you were coming down. Do you want to join us?" Victoria would offer with that sweet voice that sounded like an invitation, but actually said, "This is no longer your house." I joined because I did not know what else to do. I sat at the head of my own table feeling like an intruder. And it was at those dinners where the real cruelty began. Victoria and her friends spoke in English, of course, but increasingly they used modern slang, rapid inside jokes, entire conversations meant to exclude. "This wine is actually decent," one of them said. Monica, I think her name was, while taking a sip of my special reserve. "I know, right? I found it in her pantry." "She has no idea what she is sitting on," Victoria responded with a little laugh. They looked at me, saw my expressionless face, and kept talking, because I had made the mistake of telling Victoria months ago at that first dinner that I only knew a few basic words of technology and modern trends. And Victoria, an expert manipulator, had turned my supposed ignorance into her favorite weapon. In her mind, she had found the perfect code. She could say whatever she wanted in front of me, insult me, mock me, scheme, and I would not understand a thing. It was like having a secret language to talk about the person who feeds you, gives you a roof, has opened the doors of her life to you. Julian was sometimes present at those dinners. He laughed when they laughed, even though he was usually distracted by his phone. When I asked him later what they were talking about, he shrugged. "Just girl talk, Mom. You know how women are when they get together." He did not know, or maybe he did know, but did not want to believe it. The 2 months turned into 3, then into 6. Then we stopped talking about deadlines. Victoria had gained territory, confidence, power. My house had transformed into her space, and I had become the uncomfortable tenant of my own home. Until that dinner arrived, the dinner that would change everything. The dinner where Victoria, feeling completely certain that I did not understand a word of her rapid-fire corporate speak and cruel slang, spoke for 30 solid minutes. 30 minutes where she revealed every cruel thought, every calculated plan, every disdain she had harbored. And I let her speak. I smiled. I served the food. I listened to every word. Because sometimes the best revenge is not the immediate strike. It is waiting, observing, letting your enemy get so confident that they forget they might be underestimating you, and then, only then, showing your true hand. And believe me, my hand was much stronger than Victoria ever imagined. That night I baked a cherry pie from scratch, the same one I made for special occasions when Julian was a boy. 3 hours of careful prep, watching the temperature, making sure the crust was perfectly golden, a dessert that requires patience, precision, love. I did not know that while I was preparing it, I was also preparing my own liberation. Victoria gave me a heads up that morning. She did not ask for permission. She announced that a couple of friends would be coming over for dinner. Do not worry about cooking anything elaborate, Elena. Some appetizers are fine, but I cooked. I prepared pulled pork sliders, homemade coleslaw, baked beans, and fresh cornbread. Not because she deserved it, but because after 18 months living in my house, I still had the impulse to be a good hostess. How ironic. The friends arrived at 7 o'clock, 3 women I already knew from previous dinners. Monica, a corporate lawyer with platinum blonde hair. Audrey, a marketing manager with an uptight accent that betrayed her private school upbringing. And Chloe, a lifestyle influencer who took pictures of every dish before eating it. They entered my house as if it were a restaurant. Air kisses, expensive perfumes clashing to create an overwhelming olfactory cloud. They settled into my dining room, the same one where I celebrated my children's birthdays, Thanksgivings with Richard, the Sunday family dinners that no longer existed. Julian had gone out. An emergency at work, conveniently orchestrated by Victoria, I suspected. She preferred to have me alone, without witnesses who might intervene. I served the appetizers. Brie cheese with fig jam, charcuterie, and fresh crostini. The 4 women chatted casually at first. Trivialities about the traffic on the highway, about a new streaming series, about a trendy new restaurant downtown. I went back and forth from the kitchen, bringing plates, filling wine glasses with red wine I had bought with my pension. My own wine, served in my own house, to women who were about to destroy me. And then it started. Monica shifted the tone first. So, how long has this arrangement been going on? Victoria took a sip of wine, looked at me out of the corner of her eye to confirm I was not reacting, and smiled. 18 months now. Can you believe it? Audrey let out a muffled laugh. 18 months? I thought you said it would be temporary. It was supposed to be, Victoria replied, with that casual tone people use when talking about insignificant things. But why pay rent when you can live here for free? I continued serving. My hands did not tremble when I placed the plate of sliders in front of Monica. My expression remained neutral, perhaps slightly confused, as if I were listening to an alien language. Does she ever say anything? Chloe asked, looking directly at me while talking about me, as if I were a piece of furniture. Like about you redecorating everything. Victoria made a dismissive gesture with her hand. She is too passive, too old school, you know? The kind that was raised to never cause conflict. She is so clumsy, Monica added, pointing out how I had placed the silverware. Look at that. She set the forks on the wrong side. I had not done that. The silverware was perfectly placed according to the formal etiquette I learned during my years working corporate dinners. But I let her believe her own superiority. I returned to the kitchen. I took 3 deep breaths. I counted to 10 mentally. 1, 2, 3. Just like I did when American suppliers yelled at me over the phone and I had to maintain my professional composure. I served the main course. They did not even say thank you, and the conversation grew crueler. I cannot believe she still uses these old dishes, Audrey said, examining my vintage china. They are so rustic. When we get the house, the first thing I am doing is getting rid of all this junk, Victoria declared. And there it was. When we get the house. Not if, but when. My heart beat faster, but my face remained serene. I took Monica's empty plate and returned to the kitchen. Wait, you are actually planning to take the house? Chloe sounded impressed. How? Victoria lowered her voice, but not enough. Never enough. We have been seeing a lawyer. There is this thing called a conservatorship. Basically, you can declare someone mentally incompetent due to age. That is genius, Audrey said. It is just being practical, Victoria replied. She is almost 70. She lives alone in a property worth over $1,500,000. It is irresponsible, really. She could fall, hurt herself. Who would know? Monica laughed. You are making it sound like you are doing her a favor. Am I not? She will be much better off in a nice assisted living facility. And we will actually use this house properly. From the kitchen, where I was pretending to look for more napkins, I leaned against the wall. My legs were shaking, not out of fear, but out of rage. Conservatorship, declaring me incompetent, taking my house, putting me in a nursing home. This was not speculation. It was a plan, concrete, in motion. I breathed in. Once, twice, 3 times. I returned to the dining room with a smile that cost me every ounce of willpower I had. She does not understand a word we are saying, Victoria continued. She told me once she only knows the absolute basics of modern life. Hello, goodbye, thank you level. That is actually sad, Chloe commented, though her tone lacked even a hint of genuine compassion. To live in this modern world and be so limited. She had her time, Victoria said, shrugging. Now it is our turn. 30 minutes. For 30 solid minutes, I listened to every word, every insult disguised as an observation, every plan revealed with the confidence of someone who thinks they are speaking in a secret code. I listened, as Victoria detailed the price quotes for assisted living facilities, between $8,000 and $12,000 a month, depending on the level of care. I listened to how she planned to remodel my house, knock down this wall, open the kitchen, modern, everything. It will be worth at least $2 million after the renovation. I listened to Audrey suggest, you should start documenting things, like if she forgets stuff or acts confused, helps with the legal process. And I heard Victoria respond, already doing it. I have been keeping a journal of her concerning behaviors from a woman who managed the logistics of a major corporation for 40 years, who handled multi-million-dollar budgets before Victoria was even born, who had raised 2 successful children on a tight budget through sheer hard work. When I finally brought out the cherry pie, that dessert that took me 3 hours to prepare, my hands were completely steady. I placed a plate in front of each of them. The golden crust shined perfectly under the dining room lights. Oh, this looks actually decent, Monica said with condescending surprise. She can cook. I will give her that, Victoria admitted. Shame she cannot do much else. I stood at the head of the table. My place. The chair where Richard sat during Thanksgiving dinners. Where I presided over Sunday family lunches. I raised my glass. They all looked at me, probably expecting a clumsy toast about family or gratitude or some other phrase they could mentally dismiss and immediately forget. I opened my mouth, and my voice rang out crystal clear. I would like to propose a toast. The silence that followed was so absolute that I heard the wall clock in the living room. Tick, tock. The color drained from Victoria's face as if someone had opened a valve at the bottom of her soul. And I, finally, after 18 months of humiliations, of invasions, of plans plotted against me, I smiled. Because my turn to speak had arrived. And every word I was about to say had been earned with 40 years of work, with 25 years of saving, with 68 years of surviving in a world that constantly underestimates women like me. And Victoria was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her life. I would like to propose a toast. The words came out of my mouth with crystalline clarity, without the hesitation of a beginner, with the fluency of 40 years negotiating with executives. The glass in my hand did not shake. My voice did not waver. Victoria stared at me with her eyes so wide I could see the white around her pupils. Her mouth formed a perfect O, frozen in the middle of a breath she never completed. Monica dropped her fork. The metallic clatter against the porcelain was deafening in the silence. Audrey and Chloe exchanged looks of pure panic. But I did not stop. I had waited 18 months for this moment. Every word I was about to say had been earned with humiliation, with pain, with the dignity they trampled over and over again. For the past 30 minutes, I continued, my voice gaining strength with every syllable, I have sat here listening to every single word you have said about me." Victoria tried to speak. "Ellen," I raised my hand, a simple but firm gesture that silenced her as if I had pressed a pause button. "Every insult, every mockery, every cruel observation you thought I could not understand." I walked slowly around the table. My steps echoed on the hardwood floors I bought 20 years ago. "My house, my rules. She is so clumsy." I repeated Monica's exact words, looking directly at her. "She set the forks on the wrong side. Except I did not. I set them according to proper formal dining etiquette, which I learned while coordinating international business dinners for 40 years. Monica sank into her chair, her face going from pale to a splotchy red. I kept walking. Every step was a declaration, every word a reclamation of my dignity. "This wine is actually decent." I looked at Audrey. "Of course it is decent. It is a premium Cabernet Sauvignon that I selected personally because I learned about fine wines from the corporate clients who visited our headquarters, the same headquarters where I negotiated contracts worth millions of dollars." Audrey could not look me in the eyes. "She can cook. I will give her that. Shame she cannot do much else." I stopped behind Victoria's chair. I placed my hands on the backrest. I felt her tense up at my proximity. "I can do quite a lot, actually. I manage supply chains across the country. I trained new employees who went on to become executives. I bought this house you are sitting in right now, with money I saved dollar by dollar during 25 years. My voice rose just a fraction, enough for them to feel the steel beneath the words. "This house that you have been planning to take from me." Victoria spun in her chair. Her face had lost every trace of that superiority she wore, like armor. "Elena, I can explain." "Do not," I cut her off. "Do not insult me further by trying to explain. I heard you talk about a conservatorship, about declaring me mentally incompetent, about putting me in an assisted living facility that costs between $8,000 and $12,000 a month." Chloe choked back a gasp. She knew she had participated in that conversation. "I heard you discuss renovating my home, knocking down walls, modernizing everything, calculating that it would be worth $2 million after you erased every trace of my life from these rooms." I returned to the head of the table, my place. From there, I looked at all of them. I heard Audrey suggest that you document my concerning behaviors, and I heard you, Victoria, say that you have been keeping a journal, fabricating evidence of confusion or incompetence that does not exist. The silence was so thick I could almost touch it. "Do you know what I did for 40 years? I listened. To board meetings, to contract negotiations where one wrong word could cost millions, to executives who thought they could manipulate numbers and get away with it because I was just the administrative assistant." I leaned slightly forward, my hands flat on the table. I learned to hear not just words but intentions, to detect lies wrapped in professional language, to recognize manipulation disguised as concern. I looked directly at Victoria. I held her gaze until she was the one who looked away. "You came into my home thinking you had found an easy target. An old woman, alone, naive, someone who would not understand when you spoke about her right in front of her face. But here is what you did not know. I understood every word from day one, every comment, every plan, every contemptuous observation you made, thinking you were speaking in code." I took a long sip of my wine. I let the pause stretch out. Let them feel the weight of every second of silence. "I stayed quiet because I wanted to see how far you would go, how cruel you could be when you thought there were no consequences. And tonight you showed me exactly who you are." Victoria tried to stand up. "Elena, please, sit down," I said. Firm, final. She sat. "You have lived in my house for 18 months, rent-free, eating food I bought with my pension, using electricity, water, gas that I pay for. You have thrown away my belongings, redecorated my rooms, erased pieces of my history like they were garbage. And all this time you have been planning to steal my home, to have me declared incompetent, to erase me completely." I set the glass on the table with a sharp click. "Well, here is what is going to happen now." 4 pairs of eyes looked at me. 4 women who 30 minutes ago felt superior, invincible, in control. Now they looked like children caught stealing candy. "You," I pointed at Victoria, "will leave my house tomorrow. You and Julian. I do not care where you go, but you will not spend another night under my roof. And all of you," I looked at her friends, "will remember this moment every time you think you can underestimate someone because of their age, because they seem simple, because they do not fit your definition of sophistication." Monica stood up abruptly, muttering broken apologies. Audrey and Chloe followed her like mice fleeing a cat. In less than 2 minutes only, Victoria and I were left. She had tears running down her perfectly made-up face, black mascara staining her cheeks. Julian is going to what?" I interrupted. "Defend you? After he hears everything you have planned?" Her face paled even more. You do not have proof." I smiled, and this time my smile had nothing kind about it. "Proof? Oh, Victoria, do you really think that after 40 years managing corporate contracts and negotiations, I would not document something as important as a conspiracy to steal my house?" I walked over to the dining room credenza. From the bottom drawer, I pulled out a folder. Manila, thick, full. "Here I have copies of the emails you exchanged with the lawyer about a conservatorship. I found them on the laptop you left open 3 weeks ago." Her face crumbled. "Here I have the price quote for the nursing home in Wisconsin, the one you printed and left in the study, $12,000 a month. Shared room." I pulled out more papers, and here I have the appraisal of my house that you ordered without my permission, $1,500,000, with notes in your own handwriting about necessary renovations. I left the folder open in front of her. Her own words, her own handwriting, her own greed documented on paper. "But wait," I said with a soft, almost sweet voice. "There is more." From the same drawer, I pulled out a digital recorder, small, discreet, the kind we used in corporate board meetings to take minutes. "Do you see this? It has been recording since your friends arrived. Every word. The entire conversation is here, Victoria. Every plan, every insult, every admission of what you intended to do to me." I pressed play. Her own voice filled the dining room. "When we get the house, the first thing I am doing is getting rid of all this junk." I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria was shaking. Her hands gripped the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "Tomorrow," I repeated with glacial calm, "you leave my house, and if you attempt any legal action against me, if you even think about mentioning the word conservatorship again, I will hand all of this over to a lawyer." I leaned close to her, close enough for her to feel every word. "And believe me, after what you have done, after how you humiliated me at your wedding, after 18 months of stealing my peace, I am going to thoroughly enjoy watching you lose." I stood up straight. I picked up my wine glass. And with the dignity that I never should have allowed them to take from me, I gave my final toast. "To the women you underestimate, to the mothers you ignore, to the older women you think do not understand, because we are all listening, and sooner or later we all speak. Because what Victoria still did not know is that that recording, those documents, that proof were not my only weapon. I still had to have a conversation with my son. And when Julian heard exactly who the woman he had married was, things were about to get much, much worse for her. Victoria sat in my dining room for 5 minutes after my toast. She did not cry. She did not beg. She just stared at the open manila folder in front of her as if it were a death sentence. Finally, she stood up, without saying a word, without looking at me. She grabbed her purse, a designer bag that probably cost more than the average family's monthly salary, and left. The door closed with a soft click. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that matched the magnitude of what had just happened. I sat down in my chair. The adrenaline that had sustained me for the last 40 minutes began to fade, leaving in its place an exhaustion I felt in my bones. But I could not rest yet, because the hardest part was still missing. Julian. He got home past 11 o'clock at night. I heard his key in the lock, his footsteps in the hallway. "Mom? Victoria? I am home." I was sitting in the living room, with the manila folder on my lap and the digital recorder on the coffee table. I had prepared coffee, 2 mugs, because this conversation required absolute clarity. "I am here, my son." He walked in with his tie loosened, exhaustion in his eyes. "What are you doing up so late? Where is Victoria?" "She left, and we need to talk." Something in my tone alerted him. He stood in the doorway, tense. "Did something happen?" "Sit down. Mom, you are scaring me." "Sit down, Julian." He sat down. He took the mug of coffee I offered him, but he did not drink. He just held it between his hands, as if he needed the warmth. I took a deep breath. This would hurt me more than it would hurt him. I knew it, because I was about to destroy the image he had of his wife. And when you destroy your children's illusions, a part of you breaks too. "Did you know I am fluent in corporate finance and legal jargon?" I began. He blinked, confused by the question. "What?" "No, well, I guess somewhat. You worked at a major corporation, right?" "Not somewhat, Julian. Fluent. Perfect. 40 years coordinating operations, negotiating with suppliers, reviewing legal documents, running conference calls with executives in New York." He looked at me as if I were speaking another language. "How ironic. And you never told me?" "I told Victoria that I only knew the basics. It was a test. I wanted to see what she would do with that information. I do not understand what this has to do with." Tonight, I interrupted him. Victoria brought 3 friends over for dinner. For half an hour, they spoke in their corporate slang right in front of me, thinking I did not understand a thing. I handed him the folder. And this is what they said. He opened the folder with hands that were starting to shake. I watched his eyes scan the documents. The email to the lawyer, with the subject line, "Urgent consultation regarding conservatorship." The price, quote, "For the nursing home in Wisconsin. The unauthorized appraisal of my property." His face went from confusion to disbelief. "This has to be a mistake. Victoria would never." "Press play," I pointed at the recorder. "Mom, this is, press play." He did. Victoria's voice filled the room. Clear, unmistakable. "We have been seeing a lawyer. There is this thing called a conservatorship. Basically, you can declare someone mentally incompetent due to age." I saw the color drain from his face. "She is almost 70. She lives alone in a property worth over $1,500,000. It is irresponsible, really." His hands gripped the recorder so tightly his knuckles turned white. "When we get the house, the first thing I am doing is getting rid of all this junk." He closed his eyes. An expression of pure pain crossed his face. I let him listen for 5 full minutes. Every insult, every plan, every cruel laugh from Victoria and her friends as they described me as clumsy, old-fashioned, an obstacle to their perfect lives. He finally pressed stop. He set the recorder on the table as if it burned him. The silence stretched out. Heavy, painful. "How long?" His voice sounded broken. "How long have you known?" "I have suspected since you moved in here, but tonight I confirmed everything." "And you were not going to tell me? Or were you just going to let me live with someone who was planning to do this?" The pain in his voice pierced me like a knife. I needed to be sure. I needed proof. Because I knew that if I told you without evidence, you would choose to believe her. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw he knew I was right. "Oh my God." He ran his hands through his hair. "Oh my God, Mom, I had no idea. This whole time, Did you know anything about the lawyer? About the conservatorship?" "No, of course not." He stood up abruptly, starting to pace back and forth. "If I had known she was planning something like this, I never would have. Julian," I spoke firmly but without anger. "Did you know they were isolating me from you? That every time you wanted to visit me, she found a reason for you not to come?" He stopped. He did not answer. He did not need to. "Did you know she seated me at table 17 at your wedding? That she heard me say I felt humiliated, and your response was, 'Do not be so sensitive,' I thought. She said her family had different traditions. Did you know she has been throwing away my things? The ceramic vase your father gave me? The curtains from your grandmother? My plants that I cultivated for years?" Every question was a slap. I saw him shrink with each one. I did not know it was so. I thought she was just redecorating, modernizing. Modernizing? "Julian, she was erasing me from my own house, paving the way to completely remove me." He collapsed onto the sofa, covering his face with his hands. "I am an idiot." "You are not an idiot. You were in love, and she is very good at manipulating. But you are my mother. I should have seen it. I should have noticed. She counted on that. On you choosing to see her instead of seeing what she was doing to me. He looked up. His eyes were red. What do I do now? And there it was. The question I had been dreading, because I knew my answer would change the course of his life. You have to decide that. It is your wife, your marriage. After this, I do not know if. I do not know how I could stay with someone who planned this against you. Julian, look at me. I waited until his eyes met mine. I am not going to tell you what to do, but I am going to tell you this. Tomorrow, Victoria leaves this house. She can leave alone, or you guys can leave together. But she is not spending another night under my roof. I understand. And if you decide to stay with her, if you decide you can forgive this, that is your decision. But she will never set foot in here again. And you will have to choose whether you want a relationship with your mother or with your wife, because I can no longer have both in my life. I said it calmly, without dramatic ultimatums, just facts. He stayed quiet for a long time. I could see the conflict tearing him apart inside. Finally, he spoke. Can I stay tonight? In my old room? This is still your house, my son. It always will be. He stood up, hugged me, and in that hug, I felt years of distance dissolving. I am so sorry, Mom. I am sorry I did not protect you. I am sorry I let it get this far. I know. I am going to fix it. I do not know how, but I am going to fix it. He walked up the stairs to his old bedroom, the one Victoria had turned into a walk-in closet, where the poster of his favorite baseball team that I had kept all these years still hung. I was left alone in the living room, with the recorder, with the documents, with the evidence of a betrayal that had lasted 18 months. Outside, the city was sleeping, but I knew Victoria was not sleeping. She would be awake, planning her next move, thinking about how to regain control. What she did not know is that she had already lost, because when you strip a mother of her son's respect, when you try to steal the home she built with decades of sacrifice, when you underestimate her so much that you plan her destruction right in front of her nose, there is no going back. And the justice that would come would not just be mine. It would be Julian's too. And believe me, when a son discovers that his wife conspired against his mother, the fall is long, painful, and absolutely deserved. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I heard movement upstairs. Julian came down with a suitcase, the same one he used when he came to stay on weekends before Victoria, before everything got complicated. Coffee? I offered. He nodded. We sat in the kitchen. In that awkward silence that exists between people who have too much to say and do not know where to start, I spoke with Victoria, he finally said. Last night, on the phone, I did not ask. I just waited. She tried to deny everything. She said you were misinterpreting things, that the recordings took things out of context, that her friends were joking. He took a long sip of coffee. But when I mentioned the emails with the lawyer, when I told her I had seen the appraisal of the house with her own notes, she went quiet. And then she admitted that she had considered options for your future, that she only wanted what was best for you, that she thought you would be more comfortable in a place with people your own age. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. I told her it was over, that I cannot be with someone capable of planning something like that against my mother. I felt something loosen in my chest, a knot I had carried tight for 18 months. And how did she take it? She became hysterical. She said I was choosing my mother over her, that I was a mama's boy, that after everything she had invested in our relationship, I was leaving her over a misunderstanding. He let out a humorless laugh. A misunderstanding. That is what she called conspiring to steal your house. I am sorry, my son. He looked at me, surprised. You are sorry? Mom, I am the one who should be begging for forgiveness on my knees. I brought that woman into your life. I let her move into your house. I ignored all the signs because I liked feeling important to someone. Julian, no, let me say it. He ran his hand through his hair. That gesture he had done since he was a little boy when he was nervous. Dad died when I was 30, and suddenly it was my turn to be the man of the family. But you never really needed me. You handled everything on your own. The house, the finances, your life. And when Victoria showed up and made me feel necessary, indispensable, I clung to that. I always needed you, I said softly, just not in the way you thought. I know that now, but back then I let myself be manipulated, and in the process I failed you in every possible way." The doorbell rang. We both tensed. "That must be her," Julian said. "I told her to come get her things. Do you want me to be present?" "No. I have to do this myself." He stood up. But before walking out of the kitchen, he turned around. "I am going to make this up to you, Mom. I do not know how yet, but I will." Victoria arrived with 2 moving vans. Julian told me about it later. He said she walked in with her head held high, as if she had some moral right, some superiority to claim. She packed her things in silence, the 30 pairs of shoes, the beauty products that invaded my bathroom, the clothes that took over my guest closet, the furniture she had bought to improve the decor. I let her take all of it. I did not want anything that carried her energy. When they finished, Julian told me Victoria tried one last time. "This is a mistake," she had told him with perfectly calculated tears. "Your mother is poisoning you against me. By the time you realize it, it will be too late." Julian's response was to hand her a box. Inside were the documents. Copies of the emails with the lawyer, the appraisal, the nursing home price quotes, and a letter signed by him, renouncing any claim over my property, establishing legally that this house was and always would be exclusively mine. "In case you still had doubts about my intentions," he told her. Victoria left without saying goodbye. The vans disappeared down the street in Oak Park, taking 18 months of a nightmare with them. The following days were strange. The house felt too quiet, too big, but it was a different silence than the one I had felt when Richard died. This was a silence of liberation. Julian moved into an apartment downtown. Small, a 1-bedroom, but it was his, paid for with his own salary, without depending on anyone. "I need to learn how to be alone," he explained. "To be a complete adult before even thinking about another relationship." A week later, Rachel arrived from New York without warning. She knocked on my door at 9 o'clock at night with a suitcase and a giant smile. "Julian told me everything. Tell me you recorded that part where you spoke to them in their own corporate jargon, because I need to hear it. I did not record that part. Tragedy." She dropped onto the sofa. "But I came to make sure you are all right, and to scold you for not calling me sooner. I did not want to worry you. Mom, I am your daughter. Worrying about you is literally part of my job description." She spent the weekend with me. We cooked together, watched old movies, talked about everything and nothing. She told me about her architecture firm, the projects she was managing, her life in New York. On Sunday morning, while we drank coffee in the backyard under the oak tree, she said, "I am proud of you, for standing up for yourself, for not letting them walk all over you. I should have done it sooner. But you did it when it mattered. That is what counts." Julian began coming over every Sunday again. At first it was awkward, like 2 people learning to dance after years of not doing it. But little by little we found our rhythm. 3 months after Victoria left, Julian arrived with a check. "What is this?" I asked. I sold the car, the luxury SUV Victoria picked out, the one she insisted we buy even though it was out of our budget. $35,000. "Julian, you do not have to." "Yes, I do. It does not make up for the 18 months I made you suffer. It does not make up for your anniversary vase that Victoria threw away. It does not make up for anything really. But it is a start." I did not take the check. Instead, I asked him to deposit it into a new account. "For your future. For when you are ready to buy your own place." "Mom, I have already spent too many years of my life building a safety net. Now it is your turn to build yours." What I did not tell him is that I had opened my own account too. I had contacted a lawyer, a different one than the one Victoria consulted, and updated my will. Specific details about the house, my savings, my wishes, everything legally documented so no one could ever question it. One day, while cleaning the study, I found one of Victoria's notebooks, the journal of concerning behaviors she had mentioned on the recording. I opened it. Pages and pages of documented lies. March 28th. Elena forgot to turn off the stove. Concerning sign of cognitive decline. That day I had gone out to buy groceries. The stove was never on. April 15th. Elena confused her late husband's name, called him Robert when his name was Richard. My husband's name was Richard. It was always Richard. May 3rd. Elena could not remember where she put her keys. Found them in the refrigerator. I never lost my keys. And, definitely, I never put them in the refrigerator. Page after page of fabrications. Meticulously constructed lies to create a profile of mental incompetence that did not exist. I kept it all, just in case. 2 months later, I received a certified letter. Victoria's lawyer requesting financial compensation from the marriage. He argued she had contributed significantly to the upkeep of the home during her stay at my house. My lawyer responded with a letter that included the complete audio recording of the dinner, the documents regarding the conservatorship, the fake journal of concerning behaviors, and a detailed analysis of how every action of Victoria's constituted fraud, defamation, and conspiracy. I never heard from her again, but I did hear through mutual acquaintances that she had to move back in with her parents, that her friends, Monica, Audrey, Chloe, distanced themselves when the story leaked, that she lost her job as an event coordinator because her reputation was destroyed. I felt no joy at her downfall, but I felt no pity either. Julian started therapy. He confessed it to me one afternoon while we were cooking together. I need to understand why I let all this happen, why I did not see the signs. I am glad you are doing it, my son. The therapist says I have issues with setting boundaries, that I have always sought external approval instead of trusting my own judgment. The first step is acknowledging it. Did you go to therapy after Dad died? No, but maybe I should have. I smiled. It is never too late to learn. Today, a year after that dinner, my house feels like mine again. I reclaimed the space Victoria had invaded. I bought new plants to replace the ones that died. I hung family photos where modern, soulless prints used to be. Rachel visits me once a month. Julian comes every Sunday without fail. Sometimes I cook. Sometimes he cooks. Sometimes we just sit in the backyard under the oak tree and talk. The relationship is not perfect. There are still awkward moments, conversations we avoid, wounds that are still healing. But it is honest. And that is worth more than faked perfection. Because I learned that the silence I kept for 18 months was not weakness. It was strategy. It was patience. It was the wisdom of knowing that sometimes you have to let people show exactly who they are before acting. And when you finally act, you do it with all the cards on the table, with all the proof in your hand, with the absolute certainty that justice is not revenge. It is simply restoring the balance that someone tried to destroy. Epilogue. The wisdom of silence. Last night I pulled out my cut crystal glass again, the same one I raised that night a year ago. I filled it with red wine, a Cabernet Sauvignon, because now I consciously choose to enjoy the good things that took me years to earn, and I sat in my dining room. The house was silent, but it was my silence. Chosen, earned, mine. I looked around. The walls that I repainted back to their original color, the vintage art that I recovered from the garage where Victoria had hidden it, my plants blooming in the backyard. Every object in its right place, carrying the history it was meant to carry. This morning, while I drank coffee under my oak tree, I thought about everything that happened, not with bitterness, not anymore, with something more complex, a mix of relief, learning, and that peace that only comes when you finally defend what is yours. Last week I saw Monica, one of Victoria's friends, at the grocery store. Our eyes met at the end of the produce aisle. She looked away immediately, feigning a sudden, intense interest in the melons. I kept walking. I did not need her apology, nor her shame. I already had what mattered, my restored dignity. Julian arrived yesterday with news. He got a promotion. Project manager. More responsibility. Better salary. I am thinking about buying my own apartment, he told me, with that shy smile he gets when he is proud of himself but does not want to brag. Nothing big, but mine. Sounds perfect, my son. Would you come help me look for it? I know you have a good eye for these things. And there he was, my son, finally learning to build his life without crutches, without shortcuts, without depending on manipulators or his mother, but still wanting my opinion, my company, my presence. Not my house, not my money, not my sacrifice. Just me. I would love to. Rachel sent me photos of her latest project, a 15-story corporate building in New York, glass and steel, clean lines, modern without being cold. Do you see that entrance? She wrote. I designed it thinking of the backyard at your house. Spaces where people can breathe. My children are well. Different, with scars, still learning. But well. And I am well too. Better than well, actually. Because I discovered something during those 18 months of silent invasion. True power is not in yelling, in confronting immediately, in fighting every battle as soon as it appears. True power is in observing, in listening, in giving people enough rope to reveal exactly who they are. And then, only then, acting with surgical precision, Victoria thought she was playing me. But I had been in boardrooms where men in $3,000 suits tried to intimidate me. I had negotiated with suppliers who assumed a woman would be easy to manipulate. I had survived 40 years in a corporate environment that constantly underestimated my intelligence. Did a 39-year-old woman think she could outsmart me? Please. The other day, Mrs. Miller, my 30-year-old neighbor, knocked on my door with a freshly baked cake. I heard what happened, she told me. She did not ask for details. She did not ask for gossip. She only added, "Well done." 2 words. But coming from a 75-year-old woman who survived an abusive marriage, 3 difficult children, and decades of fighting for respect, those 2 words meant everything. We are everywhere. Women like us, the ones who raised families on impossible budgets, the ones who worked double shifts and still came home to cook, the ones who speak corporate jargon but pretend not to understand a word just to see what people say behind our backs, the ones who built estates brick by brick while being called just housewives. They underestimate us because we are older, because we do not dress in designer clothes, because we use older technology instead of modern social media, because our hands have age spots and wrinkles that tell stories. But those wrinkles come with wisdom, with patience, with the ability to play the long game while others only see the immediate move. Victoria lost because she played for a quick win. I won because I was willing to wait. Tonight, when I raise my glass again, not in a dramatic toast in front of defeated enemies, but alone in my kitchen with only the sound of the crickets in the backyard, I think of all the women who are going through what I went through, the ones who feel they are losing their space, their voice, their value. I want to tell you this: you are not alone, and you are not defenseless. Every wrinkle on your face is a battle won. Every gray hair is a testament to your resilience. Every year lived is accumulated experience that no arrogant younger person can buy or fake. Do not let yourselves be erased. Do not let anyone, daughter-in-law, son-in-law, son, daughter, whoever it may be, take away what you built. And if you have to wait, if you have to keep quiet temporarily to gather your strength, do it. Because strategic silence is not surrender, it is preparation. And when you finally speak, when you finally act, let it be with the absolute certainty that you are right, you have proof, and you have the indisputable right to defend your dignity. I look at my cut crystal glass, the same one I held a year ago as my world was changing, the same one I hold now in a world that became mine again. And I smile, because in the end, the glass I raised that night was not just a toast, it was my declaration of independence. It was my return to myself. It was the moment where a 68-year-old woman reminded the world that underestimating someone because of their age is the most expensive mistake you can make, and I would do it 1,000 times over. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you listening from? Have you experienced something similar, where you had to defend yourself against someone who underestimated you? Or do you know someone who needs to hear this story? Leave me a comment, sharing your experience, and what city or country you are joining us from. Your story matters just as much as mine. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you feel that you are not alone in your battles, give me a like and share it with that person who needs to remember their own strength. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of women who rose up when the world tried to knock them down. Because we all have a story to tell, and we all deserve to be heard. See you in the next story. And remember, never underestimate the power of a woman who has learned to wait for her moment.